Hey, what is up, you guys? Welcome to my channel, or back to my channel if you're new here. My name is Ivy, and today we are going to be talking about books I've read in the past 2 months. Let's just hop right into it. The first book that I read in June was such a hit. It is Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. This was like the book talk book of the month in June, or maybe it was May. The cover is gorgeous, and I feel like that's definitely why so many people were talking about it, because I would definitely just like pick this up on a whim because the cover is so pretty. It is about this girl named Chani. She is an aspiring writer, and she gets to cover this story on this famous guy named Gabe, who is playing the new James Bond. And basically everybody thinks that Gabe is gonna be like the worst James Bond ever, and Chani's article is supposed to like revive what people think of him. And it's dual timeline, so they basically have this like crazy weekend together, and I think see each other maybe a couple more times in between, and then 10 years later she's supposed to write another article on him. I personally loved this book. I rated it 5 stars, but this was by far my favorite romance book that I've ever read. Some people have compared it to Emily Henry. I've only read like half of Book Lovers by her, and I don't know how I would say that this writing compares. I just really enjoyed this book. I thought that even though it was very insta-love, typically I hate that, I felt like the characters really liked each other, and it was just kind of like a when you know type of thing, and it didn't matter that they'd only had a small amount of time together. I loved the main character. I loved the guy in this book, which I typically always hate the guy, but I loved the guy in this book. I loved the storyline. I genuinely loved everything about this book. They play a game in this book that to me is like 100% based off of True American and New Girl, because it's just like a game that sounds like kind of stupid. The only thing that I will say about this book is the article that the author, or the article that the main character writes in this book, is based off of the GQ article about Chris Evans, but the author never gave the original writer of that article any credit. And if you read the article, like, it is clearly the inspiration, which, I mean, that's like the whole premise of this book, is the article that she writes about their like crazy weekend together. And I don't know, I feel like an author not giving another author credit for their work is kind of sleazy. I don't know if like now she has, or if she just did originally when she published the book. But yeah, I loved this book. I feel like I cannot express truly how I feel about this because I read it so long ago, and I don't honestly remember like that many details about it. I just remember when I was reading it, I knew like that it was my favorite romance book I'd ever read. The next books that I have here were for a Reading Colleen Hoover for a week, which was on a flash drive that I unfortunately lost, so you will not be able to find that video of mine because it never ended up becoming a true video. I've only ever read 2 other Colleen Hoover books. I read Verity and It Ends With Us. I read those both last year. They were the only books that I read that last year, and I rated them both 4 stars. Really quick read for me, but I thought it was like really cheesy, and I also rated Verity 4 stars. Verity, like, I had mixed feelings about. I think it was because I went into it with my sister telling me like this is a crazy book, like it's so good, and then of course I was like waiting and I never felt like I got to it. But Verity is definitely my favorite Colleen Hoover book that I've ever read. The one Colleen Hoover book that I was super excited to read was Confess. This is about a girl named Auburn who has kind of like this mysterious past, and you know that she needs money, but they don't really tell you why she needs money, and she ends up stumbling upon this help wanted sign at this art studio run by this guy named Owen. And the art studio basically has like a little box outside of it, and you write a confession, and then Owen draws or paints, I think he paints, a picture of that confession, and the pictures are in the book, which is really cool. So I thought that the concept sounded so interesting. First plot twist really got me good. I remember sitting in bed and I was just like, for so long. But then the end of the book, I feel like Colleen Hoover, after reading, I mean, I've only completed 4 books by her, but it seems like she has a little spinner with 15 plot points, and she spins 5 times and then writes a book. They all seem so similar to me. There are those, like, the plot twists I find at the end are like always kind of like that really happens. Like, it just seems very unbelievable, And I don't really like that. Like, I just don't think that I'm a Coco kind of gal, which I know that is like controversial because everybody is obsessed with her. But I'm glad that I read these books because I feel like now I'm never going to have another desire to waste my time on another one of her books. They're just not for me. I rated this 2.5 stars. I think I would stick with that. My review on Goodreads says it felt like a boring It Ends With Us. I feel like this was a draft for that with a slower plot, less complex characters. If you liked It Ends With Us, maybe you would like this, but I decently enjoyed that book, and I did not enjoy this book. Another book that I picked up by Colleen Hoover when I was trying to film that video was Too Late, which is a dark bully romance, I guess, by her. It's on Kindle Unlimited if you're interested in it. This would have been like a 1 star for me. It was horrible. It's about this girl named Sloane who finds herself in a relationship with this guy named Asa, this guy named Asa who's a drug dealer, and she's kind of like trapped in the relationship. And then this other guy comes in the picture named Carter, who is also going to be like selling drugs for Asa, but he turns out to be an undercover FBI agent, and obviously, you know, love triangle, romance ensues, blah blah blah. I don't know how people enjoyed this book. Every single page had somewhat of a sexual experience described, and they were all borderline sexual assault or straight up sexual assault. At least I didn't feel like it was written for you to enjoy those scenes. It felt like those scenes were like gross. It was just so weird. I could not push through it. Nothing was happening other than that. I didn't like any of the characters. The writing was straight up bad. The next Colleen Hoover book that I read was Ugly Love. This book is a friends to benefits to lovers book. It's about this girl named Tate who goes to live with her brother Corbin, I think his name is, and Corbin's best friend Miles lives across the hall. They start hooking up, and it's one of those like a walk to remember, like promise you won't fall in love with me type of things. And obviously like Tate catches feelings for Miles. This book I rated 4 stars, I think. I enjoyed it while I was reading it. I think that I have an issue with Colleen Hoover books is that they seem like light, fluffy romances with like a random, very traumatic thing just thrown into it for like entertainment, which I find to be kind of weird. Through the whole thing, you get flashbacks of Miles' past that are they kind of remind me of when I was reading We Were Liars. Like, they're very vague, like you don't know what is going to happen. And when the traumatic thing does happen, to me there was just no way that he could have gotten through that magically without like a lot of help, and he didn't get any. I just don't think that I'm going to be picking up any more books by her. I don't think that she is my kind of author. From the 4 books that I have read by her, I would say that Very is probably my favorite, then this, then It Ends With Us, then Confess, then Too Late, because Too Late was... Okay, the next book that I read is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This is my first Frederick Bachman book. I actually listened to the audiobook for this and then found the physical copy at the thrift store, and I had to pick it up because I loved it. I rated this 4 stars. This is a literary fiction about 6 people, I think, who all go to an open house for an apartment, and the bank across the street from them gets robbed, and the robber runs into the open house and then holds them all hostage. It's definitely not like I mean, it is kind of like a mystery because you don't know who the bank robber is until they reveal it to you at the end, but it's just kind of a book about exploring like human life and what it means to be alive and how we're all connected, and how from one person's perspective it can look like someone is like really bad, and from their perspective it can feel like that was like their only option. It's just kind of an exploration into humanity. Do you ever like see a cover of a book and then after you read it you like look at it again and you're like, oh my god, like I just got with the cover of this book like who these people are. And this book is so good. Actually, you know what, I'm changing my rating to 5 stars because I thought about this book so many times since I read it, and it is definitely like one of those books that has stuck with me all year. This book honestly kind of a fever dream that I ever read this book. It is Tampa by Alyssa Nutting. I saw this book on Book Talk. I cannot think for the life of me who the book talker is. I'll try to link her down below if I can think of it, but she reads like very disturbing, kind of out there books, and she loves My Dark Vanessa, and you guys know I loved that book. It was like the first book that ever put me into a major book hangover. I loved that book. Easy 5-star for me. And I thought this book would have kind of a similar premise. It is about a 26-year-old middle school teacher who is a pedophile, and it's from her perspective. So I thought it would be kind of like My Dark Vanessa and You mixed together. This book was very weird. I'm not sure. I'm thinking that maybe like I didn't get it. I rated it 3 stars. It would have been a 4-star read. Like, it was very enjoyable, and it was the author did a good job of kind of writing in the predator's POV, but also not making the predator enjoyable. Like, not an enjoyable character. The reason why this was a 3-star and not a 4-star is because this is a literary fiction. So to me, this is not a spoiler because I like knew this was gonna happen at the end. But it starts at the beginning of the year, like when she is looking for a boy to target, and you just kind of assume that this book is going to end whenever she gets caught, and it does. Like, the climax of the book is her getting caught, and this book was extremely serious, and then when she gets caught, it's so bizarre and so many crazy things are happening that it almost is like comical, and to me it really like took the seriousness out of the book. And the whole book was extremely realistic. The whole beginning of it, the ending of it, it was extremely realistic, except for when she got caught. It was so, like, totally out of left field. Like, never saw it coming, but, like, not in a good way. So random, unrealistic, almost, like, comical because it was so weird. And to me, it just really took the seriousness out of this book. And this book is like, it does have a very heavy, serious topic, and I wish it would have just had that theme throughout the whole book, because it wasn't like a lighthearted funny, it was like a funny weird. So that was the only major downfall that I had of this book. I'm so glad I had the lightest, fluffiest read after reading Tampa. I read the entire Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy. I read these books, I think I read all of them in 3 days, which for me is super, super fast. I do not typically read that much. The first one I rated 4 stars, the second one I rated 5 stars, and the third one I think I rated 3 stars. Overall, I would say that this is like a 4-star series, just because the last book I really did not like. If you don't know what this is about, if you've been living under a rock, this was recently turned into a Prime TV show, an Amazon Prime TV show, and I wanted to read the books before I watched the TV show. And if you have not watched the show yet and you were debating like, should I read the book before I watch the show, I would recommend reading all 3 books before you watch it, especially the first 2, because there are a lot of things that happen in the show that happen in like the last 2 books. But this is about a girl named Belly, and her brother and her mom spend the summer every single year with her mom's best friend and her mom's best friend's 2 boys, Jeremiah and Conrad. And it's like a coming of age story, and then there's like a little love triangle between the 2 brothers, which is would be so weird in real life, but is so fun to read about. It's honestly might be one of my favorite tropes, because it's so fun to read about, but it's one of those things that if it ever happened in real life, like, it would be the most awkward, taboo thing. Like, it would be the talk of the town. But in books, it's so fun to read about. I loved these books. I never read them when I was a kid. Honestly, I didn't read them because I hated the title of the book. I thought The Summer I Turned Pretty was so, like, disgusting. Like, what do you mean you turn pretty? You were always pretty. What a weird title. I loved these books. I feel like they were written in a way that you could read them when you were younger and they could grow with you, and every time you read them, you would realize, like, oh my god, like, I never got that as a kid. This is getting really heavy to hold up. But you get it later as an adult. Jenny Han did such a good job of writing what it's like to be a 15-year-old girl. How everything feels like it's about you. Everything feels like it's the biggest thing in the world. It feels like everybody's against you. Like, to me, Belly just was like what it felt like to be like a teenage girl. And so many people hate on these books because of how immature she is. But to me, that's like the whole point. Like, you're not mature when you're 15. You shouldn't be dealing with like these major things when you're 15. The second book deals with a lot of topics of grief, and I think that's why it was my favorite one, because all of the characters were kind of in their bad reputation era. Like, all of the characters were making some pretty dumb decisions, but it just made so much sense because they were all coping with their grief in different ways. And then the third book is just like, again, way out of left field. I feel like the third book, they were supposed to be freshmen in college, and there was no maturity gained from freshmen in college versus when they were 15 in the first book. They just felt very immature. It was not my favorite. Like, I just feel like I was like pushing to get through it. So yeah, the third book was not my favorite, but overall I would 10 out of 10 recommend this series. I definitely see myself rereading this every summer. I know that I'll reread it when the second season comes out. I want to buy the Amazon movie covers because I think they're so cute, and I bought the second book at the thrift store because they only have the second one, which is so sad, but the second one's my favorite and I'll have to reread it before the second season comes out. The next book that I read, and this is the last book that I read in June, is In a New York Minute by Kate Spencer. I did multiple formats of this book, so I read part of this book in the physical copy and part of this book in the audiobook. This book is about a girl named Fanny, and it's kind of like the very horrible, no good, very bad day, where she is just having like a whirlwind of a day. Like, her day is just going through the ringer, and she gets onto the subway and her dress gets caught in between the subway doors and rips like the whole back of it off, so like all of New York can see her thong. And this guy ends up like coming to her rescue. He's like unbelievably attractive and gives her his Gucci jacket to like cover her backside with. It ends up like going viral. Real life meet cute, and like everybody's obsessed with them, and they end up getting off on a bad foot, and then they keep running into each other. The book itself had such a good premise, but for some reason, like, I just didn't have the urge to continue to pick it up. And I'm typically not an audiobook person, and I started listening to the audiobook, and the audiobook I enjoyed so much more than the physical book. I don't know why I liked the audiobook so much more. Maybe it's because I could listen to it faster than I could read, so it felt like things were happening faster. Overall, I ended up rating this book 4 stars. I really did enjoy it and would definitely recommend it. I think that if you're a little bit older, maybe like mid to late 20s, if you're in that kind of stage of life where you feel like everybody's getting married, everybody's having kids, everybody's having their dream job, and you're kind of just like, where am I failing? This is the book for you, because that is how the girl in this book feels, and it's kind of like a lighthearted take on that. The characters in this book are really fun. The story's fun. There's a lot of other plot points outside of the romance, which I like, because I think that when a whole book is like just the romance, it can get kind of boring. Overall, I would definitely recommend this book. I feel like people should be talking about it more, especially since the cover is chef's kiss. The next book I read is The Truth About Love by Maisie Myers. First off, I want to say that everything I have to say about this book is no hate to the author, because I know that this is the author's debut novel and like it's an indie author. But with that being said, I did not enjoy this book. I rated it 2 stars. I heard about this book because Rachel Catherine here on YouTube, somebody sent it to her and said that it was like their favorite book of all time, and that it was the author's debut novel, and like she really wanted her to read it. Rachel Catherine loved it, and then Carter Sullivan ended up reading it and she loved it too. Carter Sullivan said this is a book where the couple, they keep getting together and it keeps being the wrong time, and they keep getting together and it keeps being the wrong time, which to me sounds like Love, Rosie, which is my favorite movie literally of all time. And I was like, you know what, I need to give this book a shot. Not the same. Not the same. First off, if you've read this book, the cover of this book seems beautiful. The cover of this book is disgusting after you read it, honestly. I don't think that the cover of this book like is poetic or beautiful after you read the book. Like, the cover seems very dark after you read the book. This is about a girl named Summer Rain, which, can we just discuss how hard it was to take her seriously the whole book when her name was Summer Rain? Summer Rain. Her sister's name was Winter Snow. But anyway, Summer Rain, very early on, you realize that she deals with really difficult depression, and a lot of different mental health issues, and she ends up meeting this guy in high school, and it goes from them in high school probably until like 10 years after high school, and how they kind of keep getting together and then it not working out, and then they keep getting together and it not working out. And the book is essentially about like, is love enough? Like, can you get through everything else in life if you're in love, or do you need something else? I hated this book. It was honestly awful. I cannot believe I pushed to read the entire thing. I think the only reason I did is because I read it on my phone, and it's so easy to just like hide what place you're at in the book and kind of forget how long you have to finish it. I don't understand how people like it. I truly don't understand how people like it. So if you have read this book and you loved it, please tell me why, because I don't get it. The guy love interest in this book, I hated with a passion. He was mean, he was possessive, he, to me, kind of gaslighted the girl into thinking, I'm so supportive of you and your depression, but not being supportive of her. There was this one scenario that happened in the book, like this one particular scene that happened in the book when the girl is majorly struggling with how she feels about herself and her self-confidence and like self-loathing, and she does something that to me doesn't excuse why she did it, but it explains it. And the guy in this book, I don't even remember his name and I don't care, was ruthless to her after she did it. And it wasn't even a big deal. To me, it wasn't a big deal. It was something that they should have stopped. They should have talked about it. She could have tried to open up about why she was feeling the way she was feeling. He should have been supportive of her, and he just like tore this girl apart because of something that she did. And that happened pretty early on into the book, which made me hate the man through the whole thing. This also kind of gave me Colleen Hoover vibes, where every time they couldn't be together, it was like, in what freaking world would that happen? Like, in what world would that happen? How did that happen? And then something else tragic happens, and it's like, well then how did that happen? Like, so much stuff that is so rare. Like, I get everything that happened in this book could happen in real life within like the span of 5 years. I don't think so. I don't think so. Like, it was just everything that happened, it was like, you're kidding me. You're kidding me. Couldn't care less about the characters. I didn't believe their love at all. I like could not feel that they loved each other. They were definitely like trauma bonded because the guy had his own pile of issues. And to me, they got together because they were both extremely traumatized from things that had happened to them. They both had things to work out, and they were trying to use each other to fix their own problems instead of fixing their own problems for themselves. I would not recommend it because I think that the book took traumatic things and put them in for a fun story. Not a fun story, because this was not a fun story. This was just not the book for me. This was by far like the worst book I probably read all year, other than 1,000 Boy Kisses and Too Late, which I did not finish. Probably the worst book that I actually finished all year. After The Truth About Love, I picked up, the lighting kind of changed, Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, which was incredibly big on TikTok. This book was everywhere. I rated this book 4 stars. I would describe it as the adult version of The Summer I Turned Pretty. This was also compared to Love and Other Words, which I haven't read, so I do not know how those compare, but I've heard that they're very, very similar. This is about a girl named Persephone and her parents buy this lake house, and the neighbors, the neighbors of the lake house that they buy is this single mom and her two boys. And it goes through their summers, I think from when they're like 11 to when they're 18. And their last summer when they're 18, you know that something like bad happens. And this is why they've never spoken to each other, I think for like 13 years or like a crazy amount of time. Then like 12 years later, it's an extremely long period of time. I don't remember the exact amount. The two boys' mother dies. So she comes back for her funeral and reconnects with the boy named Sam, who she was best friends with when she was younger, and you're, you know, finding out about their love story up until you find out why they don't talk to each other anymore, that kind of thing. Second chance romance, summer romance, you know, all the things that we love. When I was reading this book, I did not get why people loved it so much. I didn't think it was bad, I just couldn't really get into it. And then the like big reveal at the end happened of why they don't speak to each other anymore, and I think that will definitely make or break the book to you. I loved what happened at the end. I thought it was very realistic. It made sense. Like, I think that why people don't like the ending of this book and why people don't like The Summer I Turned Pretty is because the children in these books act like children, and to me it was very realistic what happened, and I loved what happened. I thought it was resolved really nicely. I loved the ending of this book. The last half of this book to me is like 10 times better than the first half of this book. So I would definitely recommend this, and if you're having a hard time getting through the first part, definitely push through because it is so worth it. It's such a fun summer read. Definitely would recommend, if you have not picked up this book this year, I would definitely recommend that you do. And the cover again is gorgeous, and again it's like so cute for what happens in this story. Like, we love. Okay, the next book that I read, I listened to the audiobook, and that is Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus. McManus. I think it's McManus. I have read 2 other books by her. I've read You'll Be the Death of Me and One of Us is Lying. This one was by far my favorite book by her. I rated it 4 stars. The plot of it is very confusing to explain, so I hope that I can explain it in a way that makes sense. It is about this girl named Emery. She has a twin brother, and her mom is a drug addict. So her mom gets put into rehab, and she gets sent to live with her grandmother, so her mom's mother, who they have no relationship with. And they don't know her because her mother, Emery's mother, when she was younger, had a twin sister, and her twin sister was murdered, and it was never solved. And then 5 years before Emery moves to the town, so before present day, I wasn't recording. Okay, I'm currently filming this video, and this book is so confusing, and I did the absolute worst job at trying to explain it. So let me give you a quick rundown. Okay, there is a town, like, let's say 20 years ago. Twin sisters. One of them dies. The other one leaves town. Fast forward 15 years. Another girl dies. Then 5 years after the second girl dies, the twin sister who survived, her twin children moved to this town, and everything with these 2 murders kind of gets like brought back up again, and how like everybody is intertwined together. The plot is very confusing to understand before you go into the book, but once you read the book, it's very easy to understand. Pretty Little Liars vibes. Lots of different things going on. I really liked it. I think it was way better than One of Us Was Lying, and if you're looking for a good YA mystery, I would 10 out of 10 recommend this one. I really enjoyed this book. I thought that the whole thing was really entertaining. I liked the characters. I liked the mystery aspect of it, and I liked how it all wrapped up. The only thing that I will say about her books is they always have a subplot of romance that is like bad, that isn't entertaining, that isn't enjoyable. I think that the best subplot of romance in one of her books is what is her name? I think it's Ivy, and no, not Ivy. Is her name Ivy in that book? Brownie and Nate in One of Us Is Lying is definitely the best subplot of romance. But like, yeah, the subplot of romance in this, the subplot of romance in You'll Be the Death of Me, which I think that girl's name is Ivy. They're both like kind of bad. On Goodreads I said I rated this a 4.5. I think that's because there was like a lot of reveals at the end, and it was one of those books like Daisy Jones and the Six where the last line was so good. So I definitely think that that's why I rated it a 4.5 on Goodreads. The next book I read is Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry. This was not on my radar to read literally at all. I picked this up in a free bin at my library years ago. This was a reread for me. I read this in high school. I recently forced my boyfriend to watch this movie because he had never seen it before, and it just reminded me of a movie that he would have been obsessed with and watched it like every night before he went to bed. And this is definitely like the best book to movie adaptation ever. The movie is so good. The book is so good. If you don't know what this book is about, it is about this boy named Charlie, and he writes letters to kind of like this unknown character just about his freshman year of high school, and kind of him coming of age, and him working through trauma that he has, and why he isn't like everybody else, and he feels like he doesn't fit in. It's just a really good book, and I feel like the book talks so much, without like specifically saying that they talk about it, about like generational trauma and about how your parents, like what they went through can really affect you, and like how your grandparents are can really affect you. And it's just so good. The characters in this book feel so real. It's such a good book and such a good coming of age story. If you're not into reading, which if you're not into reading, I don't know why you'd be watching this video, but if you're not into reading, I would definitely recommend the movie, because the movie is such a great adaptation for this book. This also has like a weird plot twist at the end, which I have been watching this movie since I was too young to understand what happened at the end of the movie. So the plot twist never kind of like, I never got the full effect of it. So if you pick up this book or this movie for the first time, please let me know what you think of the plot twist, because I personally think that it makes like perfect sense, but I think it's because I've never experienced this book / movie without knowing what was going to happen at the end. So I would love to know like an outsider's opinion on that. But yeah, 5 out of 5. I love this book. This book is definitely like a book that I would give to like my kids when they're teenagers to read. I just think that it's like such a great coming of age book. The next book that I read is similar in that it is a coming of age story. It is Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blau. This book is about a 14-year-old girl named Mary Jane who, she's growing up in the 70s. Her parents are very conservative, very religious. They shelter her from a lot of things, and she takes this babysitting job down the street from where she lives with this younger couple who have this little 5-year-old girl. So she is going to be babysitting this 5-year-old girl in the summer. She kind of just expects that this family is going to be exactly like her family because it's all she really knows. And this couple is like hippie 70s. The guy's a psychologist, so he is very open about discussing your feelings, about what's going on with your life, and they end up hosting this other couple who the psychiatrist is counseling, who are like, he's a rock star and the girl is a celebrity. So Mary Jane just gets to see a completely different side of life, see how maybe like her parents aren't right about everything, and seeing things through a different light. It's just a beautiful like coming of age story, kind of about how when you grow up with one thing, you can really be convinced that that's like the only type of way to live. And when you see it through a different perspective, you can kind of think like, maybe my parents aren't right about everything. Maybe like I should get different opinions on certain things. It just discusses a lot of things about like sex and about racism and traditional roles and like the household, and how Mary Jane like thought all of these kind of obscure things because her parents are very old-fashioned, and then she gets out into the world and kind of learns for herself like maybe not every woman has to be the cook in the house, and if you like that, that's great, and if you don't, then that's fine. It's just a beautiful coming of age story. I didn't rate this book right after I read it. Like, this book is a literary fiction, so it's just like a glimpse of the girl's life, so nothing like major happens, but I have been thinking about this book a lot after I read it, and that is usually a sign to me that it is a 5-star read, so I think that I'm going to be rating it 5 stars. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this book. This is another book that I would love like for my kids to read when they're adolescents, because I just think that it does like a beautiful job of describing what it feels like to be 14 and seeing that there are all different types of people in the world. I would definitely recommend this book. It's so cute. The characters are so vivid. The little girl in this book that she babysits is so freaking cute. Literally the cutest character ever. You feel so strongly about characters in this book. You either love them or you hate them, or you just kind of like, even like for me rating this as a 20-year-old, seeing the one character's name in this book, what is her name? Sheba, I think her name is. Her being described and her doing things that I might judge somebody for, but when she does them, it doesn't feel weird. Like, it feels normal, and just kind of seeing that like everybody's just different and that's okay. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this book. I loved this book. Another favorite of the year. Honestly, like, I had a lot of like great books that I read in these last 2 months. And then the last book that I read, I listened to the audiobook again. It was The Siren by Kira Cass, which I read the selection way back when I was in middle school or high school, and I was obsessed with it. And this book by Kira Cass got a cover change, so I think that I was always under the impression that it came out after the selection came out, but it didn't. It came out years and years and years ago. Let me check. The Selection came out in 2012 and the Siren came out in 2009. So this was definitely one of her earlier stories. It is about this girl. What is her name? I don't know. But she is a siren, and it's just kind of about like her life as a siren, and she meets this boy and she can't be with him, forbidden romance, blah blah blah. I rated this book 2 stars. I think the actual idea of the sirens and like the ocean in this book I really enjoyed them. I don't know very much about like sirens and like that mythology, so I don't know if this is like typical clean cut what sirens typically are, or if this is more of like just kind of like what Kira Cass wanted them to be. But I really enjoyed the aspect of sirens in this book and the way that they were in this book, and the aspect of like the ocean in this book. I just think that the story was kind of boring. I thought the side characters could have had a way better story. The romance in the book, I didn't understand. It was major insta-lovey, and I didn't get why either character liked the other one. Nothing really happened. Yeah, it was very boring. It definitely wasn't like I rated this 2 stars because I absolutely hated it. It was more of just like I rated this 2 stars because nothing really happened. So yeah, definitely like not the best book I've ever read. It was just okay, but I listened to the audiobook, so you know, it didn't feel like a total complete waste of time. But those are the 14 books that I have read in the past 2 months. I was in a major reading slump the past like 2 weeks, so I definitely did not have the greatest reading month in July, but I'm going to the beach this month in August, so hopefully I can get tons and tons and tons of reading done. I recently just uploaded the books on my summer TBR, so if you are interested in that or looking for summer book recommendations, definitely check that video out. And if you enjoy book videos, I will have my book video playlist linked down below, and make sure that you subscribe so you do not miss any of my other videos. And I will see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.